Hello, my name is Kiana W. Mitchell, and I am a singer, songwriter, podcaster, relationship coach, and rehabilitation counselor. I'm also a Christian who, for years, grew up in a church that taught me to fear God instead of love God. For years, I felt betrayed by God and felt like God didn't love me because I wasn't perfect and because I didn't do the right thing all of the time. It wasn't until I began to read and study the Bible on my own that I realized that, yes, there is nothing I can ever do to be perfect. I will never be able to win God's approval. But the great thing about it is that I didn't have to because God loves me the way I am, and God is here to help me through any and everything that I go through. It wasn't until I realized that God was there for me and that what I had been taught about God my whole life was a lie that I began to understand who God really was. It wasn't until I began to lose my religion and focus on God that I understood who God was and his amazing love for me and how much he loved me. Each one of us have a story to tell about how we found God. Each one of us have taken a different journey and a different path to find God. So join me as we go on a journey through interviews and music to discover how people find God. Tell me I'm not. Ain't nobody gon' tell me I'm not. I'm winning. Can't tell me I'm not. Ain't nobody gon' tell me I'm not. I'm winning. Can't tell me I'm not. Ain't nobody gon' tell me I'm not. I'm winning. Let's go. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Finding God. I am your host, Kiana W. Mitchell. This week on the podcast, we have an amazing guest. Her name is Alexia Carrillo, and she is an entrepreneur. She's a mom, she's a wife, and she's also a podcaster. And she has a podcast called Mama with a Calling. Alexia has an amazing story to share with us about how she found God. So without further ado, here is my interview that I did with Alexia. Hello, Alexia. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for being on the Finding God podcast. I am super excited to have you here with us. I love what you're doing with your podcast, and we'll get to that in a while. But before we start, this is my number one question I ask everybody. What was your childhood like?
Oh my goodness. My childhood, I grew up in East Tennessee in the Appalachian Mountain area. Single mom that had 3 kids, and we were pretty poor. But I mean, I knew my dad and stuff. It wasn't like he wasn't anywhere in the picture, but really it was just my mom and my sisters. And it was kind of, we moved around a lot. I ended up moving in with my grandmother when I was about 13. And then I was able to stay in one place. I moved from school to school to school. So had a lot of like instability in that way. Mm-hmm. And even from a young age, I guess relating it back to God, or just like kind of bringing that in there. From a young age, I was always like a church orphan, as they called it. Like my mom would send me on the little bus that came to the apartments to pick up kids. So I would always, go to VBS or random little things like that. And when I was a teenager is when I really started going to church more. So I had more stability in that time. But it's a really, really small nutshell of my life. It was kind of chaotic though.
Wow. No, the part when you say you had sisters, my mom was also a single parent, and she had 3 girls as well. So I can definitely identify with that. And mm-hmm. about going to church, even though we didn't go on a bus, I did see the bus that would come to the apartments where we lived to pick kids up. But my mom would drive us because she went, and so we would go every single week. So I totally understand about the whole church thing. Mm-hmm. So what was something when you were younger that you heard at church that really resonated with you and that you could say had helped you as you grew up and as you went through your life?
I think that, it's hard when I was like little. So, okay. So I have like 2 things. One is that from a young age, I was kind of like a rule follower. I've always been really into following rules, which will come into play later if we talk about kind of my journey with God. But I think that really something about church, and almost like I never doubted that God was God. I knew that was true. And so when I heard like he wants you to do all of these things, I just paid attention so intently to every lesson, every like little older lady that would come to the Boys and Girls Club and do a little lesson. And I was like, I know the answer. And like, I just was really into that. And so from a young age, I was actually really like, because of those little lessons, I never did anything like off, like I didn't do drugs, I didn't drink, I didn't do anything kind of off the path. I just always was like, nope, that's not what the Bible says. I wasn't reading it for myself, but I just knew that. And then as I got older, I guess like older in high school years, I really started, and really this isn't a good thing, I don't think, but the church that I went to and the way they did things, it was very, not Bible thumping, but like kind of like go, like very evangelical, like go door to door and like knock on the door, like, are you going to heaven or hell? If not, like, why not? And like kind of in people's face. And I really believed that was necessary. And when I was in ninth grade, I went to, it was called Creation Camp. And I think it was at Billy Graham's, like, center in North Carolina or whatever. And I had just gotten saved like earlier that year. And when I went to this Creation Camp, they were talking about evolution and all the reasons why it wasn't real. And I was just like, what? Like, I've never known any of this. And I kind of went into this almost like an apologetics, like, I'm going to give information and nobody's going to go against God. And so I kind of did that from like teenager years up until like even into college, and super judgy on like, that kind of impacted me in kind of a negative way, but I thought it was good. I mean, I know the heart behind it was good, like that I was trying to just say, no, this is the truth, but the approach wasn't so great.
No, I get it. And it's funny you brought that up because the episode that I did last week, the guy, Josh Evans, he's a podcaster as well. He also talked about how he was super judgy because he was brought up in a church. And I totally understand that because I also was a super judgy person. And, I don't think that is something we could fault ourselves with being super judgy, because it's almost like it's ingrained in you. And especially if you were there from the time you were a child and all the way up, you're always taught this is right. We're the right people. We have the true religion. Nobody else does. You have to tell them before they go to hell. So, I mean, how could you not grow up being judgmental? This is all you know. It's kind of like you're trained to judge other people so you can bring them to heaven or bring them to God. So no, I get it. Because even though my religion was different, we also had to like knock on doors and try to sell people tracts to try to tell them about God and give them books. And yeah, it's just like, it was impossible not to be judgy if you were brought up in that type of environment. And you're not the only one. We all had a judgmental kind of attitude because that's all we knew. Like, seriously, that's all you know if you grow up with a religious background, which, like you said, can also be a hindrance to what we should be because we're too busy judging people.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it, just as you're saying that, I'm remembering being sort of frustrated because it's like I knew at the core level that I wanted them to accept this truth, but the way I was carrying it out was pushing people away, and I just was so confused by that. And it's almost like I was embodying the very thing that people don't like about Christianity or religion, and I just didn't understand it. And I just was so, I lost friends over that, or people just wouldn't want. I remember just being people telling me that I was just in general just a judgmental person. And I mean, I still have to really check myself on that. But yeah, I just remember feeling just really frustrated and disconnected with that. And it took a long time to understand that that's not the way that it needs to be. Right.
Right. So what incident in your life helped you realize that's not the way it's supposed to be? What happened?
I think that, well, when I was in college, I went to a Christian college, not on purpose. I just went to the school because it was close to my home and I just wanted to go there. And it was actually a Presbyterian school, which I wasn't Presbyterian. So that's fine, but it was a little different. And I just remember my freshman year, I guess, and in the sophomore year, I had my own dorm room. I was by myself and like at the end of the hall. And so like nobody ever came in there. And I spent a lot of time, I was going through a season of depression. And I spent a lot of time reading the Bible myself, almost like for the first time, like really reading it and really seeking truth and understanding, because I was just so, when something big happens in someone's life, they can either turn away from God or turn to God. And I like, luckily, I guess I turned to God every time. And so I turned to God, like, just heavy, like hardcore. And when I was doing that, I was like, wait a minute, this is not like, we should not be so, like, I just was seeing, I guess, the old church that I was at in like in a different light. And I remember going and trying to continue to go there in college, and then just realizing like they are so judgmental. Like, this woman was the like leader of our little college Sunday school, and she was saying that, you know, if you're a Christian, she was a teacher, and she was like, if you're a Christian, you should not dress like a certain way. And I was just like challenging her, like, why would that affect it? Just, I just didn't like the thing they're saying, like, you know, you should look a certain way. And I'm like, but still, it just had this undertone of like button up shirts and your hair a certain way and all this. And I was just like, that's not fair. That's not what God sees. He sees our heart. And so I think that was a big moment where and actually from then on, I kind of just like quit church. I mean, I just didn't go to church probably for like 10 or 15 years. I mean, it was a long time. I just didn't go. I kept trying to go to church, but the religion part didn't align with what I was reading in the Bible. And so I was like, no, I don't want to go.
No, I get that 100%, because it's funny you mentioned clothes, because I had experience, and that's the thing that made me start to realize things, because I would see things when I was younger. You know, as I got older, I started to read my Bible for myself, and it was just saying something different. And I remember I would ask people about it. I would question people about different things, and they would be like, well, no, this is how it's supposed to be. And I just felt as I got older and older that this is just too, like you said, judgmental. I felt it was pushing people away from God rather than bringing people close to God. And as I got older and I had kids, and then I saw some things that happened, and people talked about their clothes. And I mean, it just came to a point where we were at a meeting. It was supposed to be like a praise team kind of thing. They called a meeting. Now this, I'm not going to go to the whole story, but they're having a lot of clothes. Let's just put clothes incidents, you know, that had come up. So we were at this meeting. I hadn't heard about it in a couple of years. I was like, okay, well, whatever. And then we were at this meeting. They're like, well, if you don't dress a certain way, you can't be on a praise team. You can't do this. You can't do this. And I was done at that point. I don't know what happened, but I was just like, I was just like, this is stupid. Like, we're in the 20th, years, 2000s or whatever. Why are we still talking about clothes? Like, have we not evolved past that? Like, that is not the thing that's going to take you to heaven or hell. Like, that's not it. Like, what are we doing? And after that, I was just done. And like you, I also just stopped going to church. I'm just like, this is ridiculous. And I was like, I have kids, I have daughters. I do not want them to grow up being so judgmental and seeing all of this foolishness, because I don't think that's what God is like. And I'm like, they just have it wrong. So I totally get it. It's funny that we had the same reaction, because it's just ridiculous. I was just like, seriously? Yeah. I'm like, with everything that's going on, people are dying, people are committing suicide, people are hungry, people are dealing with like serious mental issues and mental health issues. And we're sitting up here fighting about clothes. Like, still, this is where we are. So yeah, I totally understand. So did you ever go back to church, or what brought you back to church if you decided to go back?
So this is a fun story. So I feel, okay, so what happened? So from that time, I just kind of just said, I'm just going to read the Bible on my own. It's my own thing. And through college, I would try to go to like Women at the Well was like a thing, and like trying to do different college. It was a Christian college. There was lots of that, but it was also in East Tennessee. And so the style of church was still the same where we kept going. So I kept trying to look. I knew that like more contemporary, as they would call it, more contemporary churches were more in alignment with the message that I was seeing in the Bible, and I wanted to embody. Like, come as you are, we'll meet you where you are, love you, exactly. People are dressing fine, but like in general, it's not like if you're not wearing a dress, you can't come in these doors.
Right.
And so I did that throughout college. But then after college, I went to grad school to get my PhD in cancer biology. When I did that, I just like immersed myself in science and just I told myself I didn't have time, because I feel like I didn't have time. I just lived and breathed the lab and just grad school. And so I was in grad school for, 6 years. And so that whole time, I think I went a little bit at the beginning, just trying to like find a church here in Nashville. And I did go for a little bit, but nothing was quite sitting. So I just let it go. Like, it was just something that really went to the back burner. And with it went my Bible and everything. not that I stopped believing, it just no longer was a focus. And I went almost, that was 2008, so probably like 2009-ish, I stopped everything. And then 2019, I came back to church. And so it was like 10 years of just like not even really thinking about God. I mean, maybe, but like just, it wasn't even a focus at all. In that time, I got married, I finished grad school, got my PhD, went on, did postdoc, did all this other stuff.
Though.
Had a son, had my son in 2016. So when I quit my job, and I knew I wanted to quit my job because, well, when I got pregnant, all of a sudden I was like, I don't want to work and I don't want to leave this little baby with people that I don't know. And suddenly it was like I went on this new trajectory, but I didn't understand it because in my mind, I was always going to be in a career. I was never going to be a stay-at-home mom, and I was never going to have my own business. There were two things that I was never going to do. And now I'm like, I don't want to go have a job, but I just didn't understand it. And so I kind of went down this path of figuring out how can I make money online? What is this world of online business? Like what? And it just was this whole thing where I was like, I don't know if science is even the thing I'm supposed to be doing. And I kind of went on this path. And at first it was focused on my son and just being home with him. And this is related, I promise. So then I came home in 2018, and my business was like, it was really stressful to transition to being home. And when I did that, I found myself looking in the online space and listening to a bunch of entrepreneurs because I was like, I just need to get this. Like I hear how much money they're making and all the success. And I know it's available to anybody, but why can't I do it? And I was listening to people, and I got into the manifestation, like law of attraction group, and I didn't understand what they were talking about. And so I just kind of kept listening, and I was like really intrigued. Like they have no worry. It seems they just have this belief that everything is going to happen for their good, and that everything is not a failure or something. It's just a lesson on the path to success and all of this. And I was like, that sounds amazing. But as they were talking, they kept saying like source energy and universe. And I was like, that's God. Why aren't they saying God? I was like, I'll just plug God in there and we'll just move on. And then I was listening to one of the guys that I really like, just loved everything he said. And he started talking about crystals. And I was like, whoa, okay. That sounds like some new age something. I just didn't see it before. And when I saw that, I was just like, no, I was just like, what does the Bible say? And I just like went outside, and I was sitting there at my porch, like trying to understand this. And I looked across, and I can't even explain why this was there, but it was like these little rocks, like stacked up on top of each other, like you would see in like Eastern religions or something. And I was like, that's what it reminded me of with the crystals. I was like, it's almost like a what I would imagine from like a movie of like witchcraft or something. And so I just opened my Bible and started like diving into that. And then I felt like just this go to Long Hollow Baptist Church is where I was supposed to go. And I was like, I don't know anybody that goes there. It's kind of far away. I'm not going to go there. Like I'm going to go to this other church that's closer to me. And so I like Googled that church to look for the pastor to see like, what are they like? And they had a guest from Long Hollow. And I was like, okay, fine. And so I go to Long Hollow, and from that moment on, it was like a religious awakening, or like a spiritual awakening. From that moment, I have just been on this, I don't even know, like I just went back to church. I dove into the Bible. I love reading and learning and studying and praying, and being at church is like, I love going to church. It's just been so different. And so I always say like law of attraction kind of like in a weird way just brought me back. And it's just cool to see that path and how that happened, because I look now and I'm like, did I even understand anything before when I was reading the Bible? Like what I thought was like a high spiritual moment for me in college was like, I didn't know anything. Like I didn't know half of what I know now. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, now that's kind of my life. And so I do that with the podcast, is to like share with people what I'm learning, because I'm like, people aren't getting it, and I need to like teach them what I'm learning.
That is amazing. So what is the name of your podcast? When did it start? And tell me a little bit more about the motivation. I know you say you're motivated because you're learning some new things and you want to share it with other people, but what made you decide to make it a podcast rather than just doing a group in your home or something like that?
So, well, I did not, so when I first went onto this in 2019 when I dove into the Bible and things. At the time, my online business, all I knew is that I wanted to teach other moms that they could be at home with their kids, because I was a scientist. There were so many other women who felt trapped in their jobs. Like they felt like they could not have the option of either having kids at all, or they were so sad because they constantly had to be at work and not with their kids. And I was just like, oh, but I know there's another way, and I need to just let them know that it's possible. And part of that became trying to show them, like, I realized there's a whole bunch of shame and a bunch of emotions that you have to go through to even handle that. And so when I dove into the Bible and was going through that, what was coming out for me was it was curing or like fixing all of those anxieties and doubts and worries, because I was reading like what God was saying, that he was going to provide and that he was going to lead and guide. And I didn't have to do this alone and all of that. And I was like, this is like the answer. And then in 2020, so I went back to work for a little bit on a contract position, still doing stuff in my business. It was a blog though. And I love podcasts for years. And I kept saying, I want to do a podcast. And I never did. But when COVID hit, I was so mad at myself because I was in this call center. I was like a trainer, a technical trainer for people doing the census. It was the year of the census. And I remember feeling like I was in a petri dish. Like I'm sitting there and all these people are coming in the doors. And this is at the beginning of COVID. And I was like, I'm exposing myself. Everybody here is risking themselves for money.
Yeah.
And I was like, we can't even make our own choices because we need this job or we need that dollar. And a lot of people here, they don't have a choice. You don't feel like you don't have a choice. Yeah. But I was like, I do have a choice. I know how to make money online. And I remember like telling a lot of the women were like, what are we going to do? And I was like, I'm not worried about it because I know how to make money. And they're like, oh, well, good for you, And I'm like, but everybody can. Yeah. And it was in that time too, like, as I went to work every day, and I think God sent me back to work for this reason, I just realized like my brain and my gifts and my abilities in this world are they have much better use than sitting at this computer, because there were times when I would literally just sit in my seat because I was supposed to, with nothing to do for like 8 hours. And I was like, I'm going to explode. Like, wow. I can't. And it was like protected government stuff. So I couldn't have a phone. I couldn't do anything else. I just had to sit there. And I was just like, we all have abilities and talents that are just being like not even used. Yeah. So I was just praying every day, going into work, listening to podcasts and all this stuff. And finally, when my son's school got shut down and I think my husband got let go from, COVID stuff, I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm going to dive into this business. And I decided I'm going to start a podcast. Like, I'm going to do this. And at that point, God just like put it on my heart so much to make it faith-based. And I was like, you want me to what? Like, I did not think that I was going to be doing like a ministry type or like Bible teaching, any of that. That was not on my radar. But the more I went through this, I was like, I have to, like, and especially like the new age stuff, I just kept seeing it more and more. And so I started the podcast, Mama with a Calling. And really the intention is to give women biblical truths and like mindset shifts, like show them the truth of everything they're going through. So giving them first of all, to recognize that they are called to do something. They don't have, the people that listen are entrepreneurs. You don't have to be, but you're called to something. Yeah. And just like helping them see that belief, undo all of the worldly beliefs about what success looks like, that you have to have this job, all of that kind of stuff. And like, because there's a lot of shame, people pleasing, sort of like, if I need to be something in the world, I need to have a job as a doctor. No, you don't. And just like switching to like a kingdom perspective. And then the courage to like, if they've decided to actually do this online business thing, giving them the courage through, most of the time the podcasts are really like, I hear something in church or I read something in the Bible and I'm like, this can be applied to what you're going through right now. Like, let me tell you how this can come into your life. And just like that courage to keep pursuing it, actually quit your job. It took me like 3 years to actually quit my job. And then just to keep going, like some of the practical stuff, as far as like when you come home with your kids, you're like, I'm home with my kids. And then you're like, I'm home with my kids. Like they're kids and they have routines and oh my gosh. And just so much that God speaks to you in all of this. And if you're not prepared for the emotions of it, and it's almost like going through therapy, trying to start a business and do all this, then you'll easily just like miss it. You'll miss your calling. You'll go back to your job and you can come back again, you can, but that's where the podcast is for me. It's just kind of teaching these women to put God in the center of their lives and to run their business for him, and that they can, and they're allowed to do this. It's okay. They might have to go against the grain, but it's okay.
Oh, I love that. You said so many things. I'm trying to think what I should talk about or what I should mention, because you said a lot of good things. And I understand where you're coming from, because first I got this, I had another podcast, which I've been doing since 2016, called Music and Therapy. But then once the whole shutdown happened and we had the whole pandemic and we had to stay home and quarantine, that's when I just really started to think. And I tell people that was the time I had a chance to detox, because before then I was going to church, I was doing all this stuff. And it's like you get involved doing so many things until you kind of lose sight and you lose focus of God and who he is and what the purpose is of even going to church or being a Christian, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So once I had that time to detox, I started to think. And once again, I was reading the Bible because I was not going to church. I wasn't listening to anybody. And then the great thing is, like, I started to listen to other people preach and talk about God. And I think that's huge, because sometimes when you are in a particular religion or a church, you don't really listen outside of that. You just stay stuck listening to what is being taught to you. And I was listening to everybody and I was like, oh, okay. And I found some people like, this is what I've been reading about. This lines up with what I've been hearing and how I'm interpreting the Bible. And so I started listening to them. Just a lot of things happened, but it was freeing for me, because for so long, I just felt like I didn't know if I was going to go to hell or heaven, because there were just so many rules. And if you break them, who knows what's going to happen. But once I started doing reading for myself and realized that God loved us and we're saved because a gift from God and not because we're trying to earn it, it just made it so easy. And then I was just like, well, you know what? People need to know this. And I was like, people should know that even if they're doing wrong at this very moment, they can still talk to God, even in the midst of what they're doing, because God sees them, he knows them, and he can help them. Like, you shouldn't be ashamed to talk to God if you are doing something wrong at that moment. Just talk to him, like, reach out. He will help you. And so that is where the Finding God podcast came from, because I wanted people to know that you can find God anywhere, no matter what you're doing. You don't have to be perfect. And kind of like let people know that you can't be perfect. So you should stop trying. And when you are at your weakest point, you should talk to God. And everything we do, we should just ask him, hey, I'm probably going to say something I shouldn't say. I need help. Because I think that me saying stuff like, oh, I'm just not going to say it, it does nothing, because I always do the thing I say I'm not going to do. So just be real. Like, I'm probably going to say this, I'm probably going to do this, but I need help not to. And, I just felt like people needed to hear that. So that is where the whole Finding God podcast came from. And then the one when you were talking about how you started your own business, I also left my job in 2019. And I have been planning this leave for like 8 years, because like you, I just felt like there was more. There was just something better for me. I was a rehabilitation counselor. I had my master's degree, but I just felt like there was just something more that I needed to do, something more I needed to say and talk about. And so, so I understand completely. And then I love how you talk about the job and everything, because a lot of times I do think that we get it confused with, there are two things I think happens with Christians. I think first, we've been taught that money is a bad thing, that you shouldn't really make it, and that if you're rich, you're going to go to hell, because, the Bible says easier for, a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven. So we'll take that and we'll be like, well, if you're struggling, if you're not making money, then, God's probably looking out for you. The devil's not going to bother anybody unless he know that they're a threat. We hear things like that. And so you think if you're not struggling or if you don't have any problems at that moment, that, oh, wow, maybe I'm not a threat to the devil, and maybe God's, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, which is totally ridiculous, because this is life. You have times when things are good. You have times when things are bad. But I don't think it means that the devil is all of a sudden, oh, he's the threat, she's the threat, let me go make something bad happen and disrupt your life. I don't think that's what happened. I just think every day we have choices and we can choose God or we cannot choose him, but he's here to help us. That's what I think. But the whole thing, people have this misconception when it comes to money. They have a misconception about what is an appropriate job for a Christian. And I just think that if you are a Christian, then whatever job you're going to do is going to have those same values because that's who you are. And so for people to see it differently, I just think it's so restrictive and oppressive because God gave us all talents. We all have different things we're here to do, and we all have a reason for being here. And so our purpose may not be what everybody thinks our purpose should be. Yeah, we could do that, but that's probably not where we're going to be the most influential. That's not where we're going to be able to help people. That's not where we're going to be able to be the person that God called us to be. So I love that. I love what you're doing. That is so amazing. I love it.
No, I think that, I mean, that was really good too. I think that, yeah, you talked about shame and not wanting to come to God. And that was something, I think the year 2020, a lot of people said it was just such a terrible year. And of course, people with COVID and everything, but there was so much good that came out of it for so many people, like you said, listening to other teachers. I've never done that, but I am all up in YouTube, listening to all sorts of pastors from all over the place. And I've actually come to realize that I believe like totally different than I thought. Meaning like I would have said, no, I don't align with that particular church or that denomination, but I'm like, actually I do, because it's what the Bible says. Like, that's what I believe. And so, I just think it opened up, so many people, because it was such a scary time for so many, or, like you said, mental health issues, people, I personally like not having to go anywhere, but some people, it really affected them and they didn't like being away from people. And there was just so much of like a flocking to the internet, like, what else are you going to do? Sure. And so I think that really, and I had so much time to read my Bible and really dive into stuff. And, the whole shame thing that came up for me too. And just like, I just wanted to speak on that, because what came to light to me was like, if I did something wrong, because I'm such a rule follower, if I did something wrong, then I would turn away, not want to talk about it to God. Like I was ashamed. Yeah. But just like with Adam and Eve, right? Like the shame is what hides you from God. It will keep you from God. And it's like, he just wants you to come and talk anyway. And when somebody said that to me, I was like, oh, that is true. Like that was shame, like from the beginning, and it's like, actually, he wants you to come. And I think of Peter, Jesus, when he first meets Peter, or at least the first, he gives the fish haul at the first time. And then at the end, when Jesus comes back and he sees Peter again, Peter had just denied Jesus. He is like on fire for Jesus the whole time. And he just denied him 3 times. And I was reading this the other day and I was like, he could have sat in his shame and not got on the shore and not went back to Jesus and he was out. He could choose that. But because, Jesus said, Satan wants to sift you. Like he's going to come after you and this is going to happen. Like your pride is going to be a thing. You're wanting to not be like in trouble. You're wanting to please people is going to come into play here, right? Because you're going to say, I don't know him, because everybody around you, you're not so strong when Jesus is being taken away. But Jesus never said, I can't believe you did that. Can you explain why you denied me? He didn't say any of that because he knew he was going to deny me. He already told him, right? He just wanted him to love him. Like, do you love me? Then take care of my sheep, take care of my flock. But what I also think, talking about the money, that's huge. Oh my gosh, I have this whole like series and I don't even know. I have to put it together because I'm just obsessed with this idea of money, because I've struggled with money growing up poor and in poverty, really. And this money mindset of scarcity is just huge. And plus from the area I'm in, it's also like you sort of make fun of people that have money, and it's, it's like a coping, but like I've been ingrained that it's like, you want to be like in the middle, like you're not rich or really wealthy, but not being too poor either, because that's also somehow negative. Like that's a bad thing too. Like you're not working enough. And so it's like this weird thing with money. And because growing up, I thought, well, if I can make $50,000 one day, I'm going to be like living it up. Well, I live in Nashville now. And so it's a little bit different as you grow up, but I just have all these money things. And so, I brought all of that to the Bible. And as I'm reading the Bible, I wasn't looking for answers, but as I was reading the Bible, I was like, God makes it very clear, especially in the Old Testament, how he loves, like he's talking about, I'm going to give you so much abundance. Like I want to give you stuff. And when he gives people all this crop, it's not just food, they're going to sell it. Like they make money. And I was like, he clearly loves to give them stuff. And but when they're in a good space, like with him, it's almost like they don't care about the money, so he gives them more. But when they're focused on the money, he's like, you got to back it up, because you can't serve two masters. But it's just like there's so much money in the Old Testament, and he says how much he wants to bless them and have all of this. And I'm like, that doesn't align. God doesn't change. So he was that way in the Old Testament. Why do we do that with the New Testament information? And you have things like Jesus saying some of that stuff. Like the rich young ruler and all of that. But actually, and looking at Paul too, Paul talks about living with like less and just kind of, whatever. But I just have noticed that like when Jesus, bringing it back, when Jesus at the end there, we met Peter again, he gave them that fish haul again, that large fish and that many is giving them money. I mean, that's why they're fishing. They're not fishing for their family food. They have a business and they are building money. And he wants them to have that. And, Paul went around, and we think of like Paul as being destitute, and he was imprisoned a lot, but he was also a tent maker. Right. And he worked very hard. And he even says, like, do not, if you have the ability to work and provide for yourself and above and beyond so that you can actually give to others, like, don't burden people, And the more I read the Bible, I'm just like, God doesn't want us to love money, of course, but if we can, he wants us to have it with good intention, because we can give it into the world. We can do good things. And I just keep thinking, like, I have been born in the United States of America. Like, there are people in this world who they weren't born here, and they weren't born now in this time and era. So like, what are we gifted with? What can we do for the kingdom, for God, with our opportunities? Because there are people in the world that don't have the chance to build as much wealth as they want, but we do. And I just have been convicted of like, if I have the option, like, I'm not called to go to live in a third world country and be without. Some people are, and that's fine, but I'm not. So why am I trying to, for a long time, I was trying to keep it low, keep the, like, harder is holier kind of a thing, and not make as much money. And I'm like, that's not what God wants from us. Like, if he's calling you to, first of all, just live here, I don't know, like, you can do good things. And, it gets all twisted, the whole thing with money mindset, but that's just such a like thing that I just love talking about, because it's a big problem. So many women won't start their businesses. They won't charge things. They won't. And I mean, I've done that. I'm coming on the other end of that, but it's like thinking that, like you said, it's not okay to make money. And so they're simultaneously feeling like they want to start a business, but they don't want to charge anything. It's like, you don't have a business. You have a thing that you're trying to do that you can't do, and then you don't have any money, and you're just in this stress.
No, it's true. And I guess people kind of, even with the whole thing, even with the whole verse I just said about easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle, God was pretty much just saying, if your love and all your attention and devotion is toward money, because I've always told people this, and people used to look at me crazy, like, no, it doesn't. I'm like, well, then if we're not supposed to have a lot of money, or we're not supposed to be prosperous, then how come all those people in the Bible were rich? And how come the kings had all of these things? And I just think it just comes back to, we need to focus on God, seek God first, and then everything else will be added, because God knows what we need. He knows what we want. And I think he wants to bless us more than what we can ever imagine. So yeah, I totally agree. And I'm glad we talked about this, because so many people have that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and even talking about people like, I thought about this at one point. I thought, if I want to bring people to God, and I'm over here trying to be as poor as possible, no one who's unsaved is going to be like, let me have some of that. Like, no. And I'm not saying that you need to draw them in with like their love of money and then like bait and switch, but it's kind of like, I mean, I don't remember the passage. Jesus says this though. He says that when somebody, I think it's in Matthew, that when somebody wants money, give it to them, because they think that's the answer. And then when it doesn't fulfill them, when it doesn't give them the security they're wanting, they're going to remember that you gave them money that they needed and wanted in that time. And then you're going to be that friend. They're going to trust you. And this is not the way Jesus exactly said it, but they're going to be able to come to you, and then you're going to tell them the truth. And it's like, when I read that, I was like, it matters. So that if we build up wealth and we show that we're not obsessed with money, we're willing to give money. I mean, how powerful is it to be able to give money to somebody and say, God put it on my heart to give you $1,000
Exactly.
or to pay your light bill or whatever. And somebody's like, God said that to you. And to them, money is everything, or money does mean a lot. But when you're saying like, it doesn't mean everything to me, it's to where I gave it away because it's not mine to begin with, that just speaks so loud to people. So we have to have money to speak like that in the world we live in. And even in Jesus's time, I mean, thinking about the cultural differences, the reason I think he said that too is because when somebody was rich then, they didn't have this, everybody can build up to, you know, become rich if they want. People were rich because they were, you know, either born into it or they were doing something bad or taxing people to death. You know, it wasn't like any old fisherman could build up a bunch of wealth and become a rich person just because of the taxes and the things, and they had the manual labor of it. We just live in such a different world. And so we have to consider that too.
No, you do, because you do have to take a lot of that into consideration, because I believe the standards and the morals of the Bible are the same, but you have to take into consideration culturally it's different, but basically it's the same principles throughout the whole thing. And I think that sometimes we miss that. Wow, I love that. So for someone who's actively searching for God, what advice would you give them?
Is this if they don't know God at all?
If they don't know God, and even if someone does know God, because sometimes you can know God, but you can still be searching for him because you want a deeper understanding, or you really want a better understanding of who he is to you.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I tell people to do that I think is just so important is to look. I think we get really busy, and I think that we miss God in a lot of things. And so one of the practices that I've done to just see God at work in my life and in the world is I look at everything that I have, everything that's happened to me that's good, or even if it was bad, but it came out good or anything like that, and just say like a gratitude of seeing how God is working, you know, and all that. There's so many things that happen to us or that don't happen to us. You know, we forgot our keys and now we missed a wreck or whatever. You don't even know all the things. But the things you can see, nature is a big one for me. I have my desk in front of this window because I look at nature and I'm just like, God is amazing. Like, this is just amazing how this comes together. And I just choose to see like God in that, but also just thinking about, like I said, you know, if like sometimes we think like, why is God not giving me more money and talking about money? As I look at it and I'm like, but I have food in my cabinets. Yeah. Like if I don't buy groceries for a whole week, I'm not dying. You know, I have shelter. Like I'm not in like, even when there's like a storm and I run inside with my son and I'm like, and I tell him, I'm like, what if we didn't have a house? But God gave us a house. We don't have to stay out there under a tree while it's lightning and in the storm. We get to come inside. Or in the winter, I'm like, I'm so glad we have heat and we have sweaters and coats. And just, I'm not saying that you need to, you know, that you only need to have the basics, but just seeing even those little things as gifts from God. And then there are other things, like I said, nature. So like noticing when things that are joyous that happen to you, kind of like back to back to back, I see those as gifts. One day there was like, I was going through this, trying to understand God's love for us. And I'll just share this little story real quick, but I'd put out an apple. I'd thrown out because I'm weird like that. I'm from the country. So I threw out an apple. I don't live in the country. I threw out an apple and then there was this little squirrel and he comes up the next day. So it was just like the timing of this was crazy. The squirrel comes up and he comes in front of the window and he's eating the apple. And I remember like kind of getting distracted from my prayer and being like, oh my gosh, the little squirrel's eating my apple. I'm so glad. And it was like, God said to me, yeah, you don't even know that squirrel. And you're so excited about the gift that you gave him, a little apple core. And it's like, I love you more than that. Like I made you, I want to, and I was like, bah. And it was like in that same day, later that evening, I saw an owl, which I love owls. And I was like, what are the chances that I would see an owl? And then there is also like the strawberry moon or something. And I was like, I just saw it as like these gifts, these things that happen. And it's like, God is acknowledging me and seeing me. And if we're not paying attention, we just see it as like, I don't know, by chance, but I'm like, really? There have been so many times where I needed something or felt like I had a question and like some verse comes up or somebody says something and I'm like, right, no way, that's just happenstance that happened. So I think that if somebody knows God already or is like looking for him more, that's really helpful. And if you don't know God and you're like, is that even real? Is that even God? I guess I would challenge people to, I think, asking God to show himself to them in those ways and to choose to look at it that way. Like you don't have to be on this earth alone. And I just think it's interesting when people say that like they don't know if God exists. And I'm like, then what are you here for? What's the point? Like you're just, I don't even know. Like when you have problems, when things happen to you, when you want something, any of that, when you're struggling, like you don't have anybody to turn to. You're just, I guess, going through life. And so it's just an amazing thing to realize that God is there, that he created you and loves you and wants you to know him. And that's the whole point. And then sharing that with other people so they can get in on it too.
No, I love that. But you brought something to my mind because I have a friend, I'm not going to mention names, and she's not a Christian or anything, and I don't think she really believes in God. But it's crazy because I remember one time we were working together and we both had the same issue or whatever. And I prayed about it. God worked it out for me. Even though she didn't pray about it, things just seemed to fall into place. And it just made me think that, wow, God loves her so much. And so she didn't even have to ask for anything. He just gave it to her because he knew she needed it. And to piggyback off of what you were talking about, when you were saying how you were going through something and God gave you certain gifts or whatever, I remember there was a time when, actually it was the other day, I was asking God some questions like, God, why? Like, I'm feeling this and I just want to know why. And it's crazy because I got in the car to pick my daughter up from cheerleading practice. And then as soon as I turned on the car, I usually try to connect my Bluetooth so I can listen to music. But on the radio, songs to answer my questions that I had just prayed about. And it's like 3 songs in a row. Like one answered the question, one told me what I should do, another one was just like, wait. And I was just like, wait, how did this even occur? Yeah. And it's odd because usually on Sundays when I would get in the car during that time, it's usually a program and somebody's talking. But this time it was music. So yeah, God does answer. And I find that amazing how you can just look for the gifts that God gives you. And he does answer. Definitely he does.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, thank you so very much, Alexia, for being on the Finding God podcast. I enjoyed having you here, and thank you for taking time out of your day to be here. If anyone want to get in contact with you on social media, how can they do that?
Yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast. It's been great. Mama with a Calling on Instagram. I'm not on there as much, but on Facebook, I have the Mama with a Calling, Facebook page or the group. Where they can find me, or Mama with a Calling, the podcast. They can also listen to more of kind of getting that encouragement from the Bible that I teach over there.
Awesome. Thank you again for being on the podcast, and you have an amazing day.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. What an amazing interview. I especially love how Alexia talks about how she grew up in the church and how she was judgmental. And I see that it's just how it is a lot of the times, because sometimes in church, we are so ingrained with religion and we're taught religion from the time we are a child up until our adult years. All you hear is about, you can do this, you can do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. If anyone does anything outside the norm, oh, it's bad, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. So, of course, it's understandable to find out how Alexia would be so judgmental. And I also like how she said the thing that got her out of her judgment was getting rid of religion, reading the Bible for herself, and realizing that what she was reading was not lining up with the religion and the values and the judgment that she had been taught as a kid. So I absolutely love that part about it. I also love Alexia's self-awareness and how she was able to realize that she was embodying the very thing that people dislike about Christians and Christianity. And I love how she was aware of what she was doing so that she could see what she was doing, realize what she was doing, and then be able to change her behavior. Because so many times we do things and we're unable to change our behavior because we don't see that what we're doing is a problem. And I think that's why so many people have the wrong impression or an inaccurate view of God, because people go and people tell them misinformation about God, or they paint a picture of God that is not who he is, but they don't know that they are wrong. They feel that they're right. So since they don't know that they're wrong, they're not going to change their behavior. And the fact that she was able to recognize that she was doing something that was not showing God in a positive light and was not accurate and was everything that people hate, the fact that she could recognize that is awesome, because then she was able to change it. And I think that's important, because you cannot change your behavior if you don't realize it's a problem. You cannot change what you're doing if you are not self-aware and see that what you're doing can be harmful to someone else. So I absolutely love her self-awareness. Now, the song that we're going to listen to today is called Life with God, and it is by our Artist of the Week, JB. So here is the song, Life with God.
When I'm with you, I'm thankful. When I'm with you, I'm grateful. When I'm with you, I'm happy inside. When I'm with you, I feel so alive. When I'm with you, I'm thankful. When I'm with you, I'm grateful. When I'm with you, I'm happy inside. When I'm with you, I feel so alive.
My life ain't never been the same, yo. Changed my heart, no halo. We can rest of my path, but it ain't been all sunshine and rainbows. And even though the hard times hit, I'm better off with the Creator. I've got exactly what the world needs in the form of a savior. Beginning and the ending, when really, what am I in need of? Cause everything is at my fingertips in the name of Jesus. I plead the cross in the face of my accuser. You don't want this smoke, cause I don't fear a thing. I'm under the wings of the Holy Ghost.
When I'm with you, I'm thankful. When I'm with you, I'm grateful. When I'm with you, I'm happy inside. When I'm with you, I feel so alive. When I'm with you, I'm thankful. When I'm with you, I'm grateful. When I'm with you, I'm happy inside. When I'm with you, I feel so alive.
I'ma throw my hands up when I praise your name. It's Romans 1:16. I am unashamed. I'm unashamed of the God that gave me back my life. Broke my chains, set me free. Praise his name, Jesus Christ. Woo! Faith and hard work has brought me a long way. On the day-to-day, I get my strength when I pray. You motivate me for success. I wanna do my best, knowing that I'm blessed. Will I make it? Answers yes. Woo!
When I'm with you, I'm thankful. When I'm with you, I'm grateful. When I'm with you, I'm happy inside. When I'm with you, I feel so alive. When I'm with you, I'm thankful. When I'm with you, I'm grateful. When I'm with you, I'm happy inside. When I'm with you, I feel so alive. Just so beautiful to live for him. Every day we awake, gotta give to him. Unconditional love and glory, cause I know this world has nothing for me. Seeking opportunities, I got to get with the Holy King. Cause he's the best, provide a deed. Then when you call in the time you need. So the grand reality is, we all gotta take a stand and seek him. No jumping off the deep end, it's a must that we give for all to please him. Guaranteed to shine and not dim. Thanks be to Christ who died for my sins. Real love begin from within. The one I like to live when it's life with him.
Let's go real spiritual. Keep your ceremony, yes, like a ritual. With you, sick fools on an issue. Your spirit grip dudes like a pit bull. I'm made in your image, I'm a pixel. So I can see the bigger picture when I pick you. Through the lens of the script, I'm a click move. Ain't framing real view through a pistol. Christ, I ain't never the same. I'm sitting in heavenly planes. Won't hide in that jet in the plane like a dealer and roulette. I'm ahead of the game, cause ahead with me, man. The general of heavenly armies is with me, the point love upon me. No weapon against me can harm me. My bend won't break like a palm tree.
When I'm with you, I'm thankful. When I'm with you, I'm grateful. When I'm with you, I'm happy inside. When I'm with you, I feel so alive. When I'm with you, I'm thankful. When I'm with you, I'm grateful. When I'm with you, I'm happy inside. When I'm with you, I feel so alive. When I'm with you, I'm thankful. When I'm with you, I'm grateful. When I'm with you, I'm happy inside. When I'm with you, I feel so alive. When I'm with you, I'm thankful. When I'm with you, I'm grateful. When I'm with you, I'm happy inside. When I'm with you, I feel so alive.
Before I end the podcast, I would like to thank you guys so much for being here with me today and for listening to Alexia's interview about how she found God. I absolutely enjoyed the time we spent together. So thank you so much for being here and for listening to the podcast. I would also like to encourage you to share the podcast episode with a friend. Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review so I can know how much you are enjoying the podcast. Now, if you would like to be a guest on the Finding God podcast, I have an email address listed in the show notes. Click on the email address and send me an email letting me know that you would like to be a guest on the podcast. If you have any music that you would like to submit to the podcast, it's almost the same process. Click on that email address in the show notes and then send me an email along with an MP3 of the song that you want to submit to the podcast, letting me know that you have a song that you would like to submit for review on the Finding God podcast. Now, if you would like to get in contact with me or Alexia or JB, all of our information can be found on the show notes. So all you have to do is click on the link and you will definitely be able to get in contact with us. Okay, well, I think that is all for today. Until we meet again, have an amazing day, a wonderful weekend. Truly, truly enjoy your weekend. And I will talk to you again next Friday. Bye-bye.